He ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen. He conquered half the known world by age 30. And on June 10, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great died suddenly and mysteriously, possibly poisoned by his own generals. His death triggered 40 years of warfare as his empire tore itself apart. 6 of his generals and family members would also be assassinated within a decade. The greatest military mind in history killed not on the battlefield, but by those closest to him. Today, we're revealing 9 of history's most powerful rulers who met violent ends, not in glorious combat, but through murder, betrayal, and assassination. From Roman emperors stabbed by their own guards to kings beheaded by their own people, these stories prove that wearing a crown has always been the most dangerous job in the world. Let's start with the assassination that changed everything. Number 1. Julius Caesar, stabbed 23 times by the Senate. March 15, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, enters the Senate. He's been warned by a soothsayer to beware the Ides of March. His wife Calpurnia begged him not to go, claiming she had nightmares of his murder. But Caesar went anyway. As he takes his seat, a group of senators surrounds him. One grabs his toga, another strikes the first blow, a stab wound to the neck. Then chaos erupts. 23 knife wounds, 23 senators participating in the assassination. They stabbed him so many times they accidentally wounded each other in the frenzy. Caesar tried to fight back initially, but when he saw Marcus Brutus, whom he'd treated like a son among the assassins, ancient sources claim he pulled his toga over his head and said, "Et tu, Brute?" You too, Brutus? He stopped resisting and let them finish. Why did they kill him? The senators claimed they were saving the Republic from tyranny. Caesar had accumulated too much power, declared himself dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, and showed signs of wanting to become king, a title Romans despised. But the assassination backfired spectacularly. Instead of saving the Republic, it destroyed it. Caesar's death triggered a civil war. His adopted son, Octavian, later Emperor Augustus, hunted down the conspirators, executed them, and ultimately transformed Rome from a republic into an empire, exactly what the assassins had tried to prevent. Caesar's murder is probably the most famous political assassination in history. It changed Rome forever and proved that killing a leader doesn't necessarily stop their agenda. Sometimes it accelerates it. Number 2. Emperor Caligula, murdered by his own guards. January 24, 41 CE, Rome. Emperor Caligula is leaving the theater after watching a play. He's surrounded by his Praetorian guard, elite soldiers whose job is to protect the emperor with their lives. Instead, they stab him to death in a palace corridor. Caligula reigned for only 4 years, but he packed a lifetime of madness, cruelty, and excess into that short period. He declared himself a god, married his sister, allegedly made his horse a senator, executed people for entertainment, and drained the Roman treasury on absurd projects. But what got him killed wasn't the madness, it was his systematic humiliation of the Praetorian Guard. He mocked them publicly, gave them degrading passwords, and made them objects of ridicule. These were proud military men, and Caligula treated them like court jesters. Finally, a group of guards led by Cassius Chaerea had enough. They cornered Caligula in an underground passage, stabbed him repeatedly, then hunted down his wife and infant daughter and murdered them too, ending his bloodline completely. The Praetorian Guard did something unprecedented. They chose the next emperor. They found Caligula's uncle, Claudius, hiding behind a curtain, terrified he'd be killed next, and declared him emperor on the spot. This set a dangerous precedent. The Praetorian Guard realized they had the power to make and unmake emperors. Over the next 2 centuries, they would assassinate multiple emperors and even auction the throne to the highest bidder. Caligula's murder showed that even absolute power means nothing if the people with swords decide you need to die. Number 3. King Edward II of England, murdered in horrific fashion. September 21, 1327, Berkeley Castle, England. King Edward II of England is being held prisoner in his own kingdom. His wife, Queen Isabella, and her lover, Roger Mortimer, have deposed him. They've forced him to abdicate in favor of his teenage son, Edward III. But keeping a deposed king alive is dangerous. He's a rallying point for loyalists. So Isabella and Mortimer decide he must die. But it has to look natural. No visible wounds, no evidence of murder. The method they allegedly chose was unspeakably brutal. According to later accounts, though historians debate their accuracy, assassins held Edward down and inserted a red-hot iron poker into his body through the anus, burning his internal organs while leaving no external marks. His screams were reportedly heard throughout the castle. Why such cruelty? Edward II had been a weak king, dominated by male favorites, militarily incompetent and politically disastrous. But worse, from a medieval perspective, there were persistent rumors that his relationships with male favorites were sexual. In an era when sodomy was considered among the worst possible sins, his alleged murderers may have chosen a method that symbolically punished what they saw as his greatest transgression. Edward II's death allowed his son Edward III to eventually take real power, end Mortimer's regency, and become one of England's greatest warrior kings. But the manner of Edward II's murder remains one of the most horrifying royal assassinations in history, if it happened as described. Modern historians question whether the poker story is true or propaganda invented later to demonize Isabella and Mortimer. We may never know exactly how Edward II died, but we know he was murdered, and that his death was violent enough that his jailers tried very hard to hide it. Number 4. Tsar Paul I of Russia, strangled by nobles. March 23, 1801. St. Michael's Castle, St. Petersburg. Tsar Paul I of Russia is asleep in his bedroom, a room he specifically designed to be assassination-proof. Heavy doors, loyal guards, secret passages. He knew people wanted him dead. A group of nobles and military officers, including the governor of St. Petersburg, Platon Zubov, breaks into his chambers around midnight. They've been drinking heavily for courage. They demand Paul abdicate. He refuses. A scuffle breaks out. Paul is struck in the head with a heavy snuff box, knocked unconscious, then strangled with a scarf. The next morning, Russia's government announces that Tsar Paul I has died suddenly of apoplexy, a stroke. Nobody believed it, but nobody dared contradict the official story. Why did they kill him? Paul I had become increasingly erratic, paranoid, and tyrannical during his 5-year reign. He changed laws daily, alienated the nobility, terrorized the military with unpredictable punishments, and seemed to be steering Russia toward alliance with Napoleon, which the nobility opposed. But here's the dark twist. His son, Alexander, the heir, knew about the plot. The conspirators had assured him they only planned to force Paul to abdicate, not kill him. Whether Alexander actually believed that, or chose to believe it, is debatable. When they informed Alexander that his father was dead, he reportedly broke down weeping. But he also immediately became Tsar Alexander I and did nothing to punish the conspirators. Make of that what you will. Paul I's murder demonstrated that even autocrats could be removed if enough powerful people decided they were a threat. His assassination was essentially a palace coup disguised as natural death, a pattern that would repeat in Russian history. Number 5. King Charles I of England, executed by his own people. January 30th, 1649, Whitehall, London. King Charles I of England steps out onto a scaffold in front of thousands of spectators. He's about to become the first English monarch publicly executed by judicial process, beheaded not by assassins, but by legal verdict. This wasn't assassination, this was something new, regicide by trial. Parliament had put their king on trial for treason, convicted him, and sentenced him to death. Charles believed absolutely in the divine right of kings, that monarchs were chosen by God and answerable only to God. He dissolved Parliament when it disagreed with him, ruled without it for 11 years, and when civil war erupted, he kept fighting, even when defeat was inevitable. The English Civil War lasted from 1642 to 1649 and killed roughly 200,000 people. By the end, Parliament's forces had won decisively. Charles was captured, tried, and found guilty of being a tyrant, traitor, murderer, and public enemy. On the scaffold, Charles gave a final speech defending his actions. Then the executioner, identity unknown, masked to avoid retaliation, raised the axe and brought it down. The crowd's reaction was reportedly shock and horror. Many screamed, some fainted. This wasn't supposed to happen. Kings didn't get executed like common criminals. Charles's death sent shockwaves across Europe. If the English could try and execute their anointed king, what stopped the same from happening anywhere? Monarchies everywhere tightened security and cracked down on dissent. Ironically, England's attempt to establish a republic failed. Within 11 years, monarchy was restored under Charles's son, Charles II. But something had fundamentally changed. The idea that kings ruled by absolute divine right had been shattered. Number 6. Tsar Nicholas II and the Romanov family, executed in a basement. July 17, 1918. Ekaterinburg, Russia. The Bolsheviks have won Russia's civil war. Tsar Nicholas II, who abdicated in 1917, is being held with his family in a house called the House of Special Purpose. Around midnight, the family, Nicholas, Empress Alexandra, their 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, their doctor, and 3 servants, are woken and told to dress quickly. They're told they're being moved to a safer location because anti-Bolshevik forces are approaching. They're led to a basement room. Nicholas asks for chairs for his wife and son, who was ill. The chairs are brought. Then 11 men with guns enter the room. Yakov Yurovsky, the execution squad leader, reads a brief statement. The Oral Soviet has decided to execute them. Nicholas barely has time to say, "What?" before Yurovsky shoots him in the chest. Then chaos. The executioners fire frantically at the family. The children had sewn jewelry into their clothes as a precaution, and the gems actually deflected some bullets, prolonging their agony. The executioners had to finish some of them with bayonets. The entire family, plus their servants, were murdered in that basement. Their bodies were loaded onto a truck, driven to a forest, burned with acid and gasoline, then buried in unmarked graves. For decades, the Soviet government denied this happened, claiming the family had been moved to safety. Only in 1991, after the Soviet Union collapsed, were the remains discovered and identified through DNA testing. Why murder children? The Bolsheviks feared that as long as any Romanov lived, they could become a rallying point for counter-revolutionaries. To secure their revolution, they believed they had to eliminate the entire bloodline. Nicholas II's execution ended 300 years of Romanov rule and demonstrated the revolutionary principle that kings were not sacred. They were just people who could be killed when they stood in the way of change. Number 7. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the assassination that started World War I. June 28, 1914, Sarajevo, Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, is visiting Sarajevo with his wife Sophie. Earlier that morning, a bomb was thrown at their car. It missed, injuring people in the car behind them. Franz Ferdinand, shaken but defiant, continues with scheduled events. Later, their driver takes a wrong turn. As the car backs up to correct course, it stalls directly in front of a young man named Gavrilo Princip, one of the conspirators from the earlier failed bombing attempt. Princip can't believe his luck. From 5 feet away, he fires 2 shots. One bullet hits Franz Ferdinand in the neck, the other hits Sophie in the abdomen. Sophie dies almost immediately. Franz Ferdinand's last words are allegedly, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die, live for our children." Within minutes, the heir to one of Europe's great empires is dead. This assassination triggered a chain reaction that plunged the world into war. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for supporting the assassins. Germany backed Austria-Hungary. Russia backed Serbia. France backed Russia. Britain backed France. Within 6 weeks, all major European powers were at war. World War I killed 20 million people, destroyed 4 empires, and reshaped the entire world. And it all started because a driver took a wrong turn and a 19-year-old Serbian nationalist happened to be eating a sandwich on that exact street corner when the car stalled in front of him. Gavrilo Princip thought he was striking a blow for South Slav nationalism. Instead, his 2 bullets started the deadliest conflict in history up to that point and fundamentally changed the 20th century. No assassination in history has had more far-reaching consequences. Number 8. King Alexander I of Yugoslavia, filmed assassination. October 9, 1934, Marseille, France. King Alexander I of Yugoslavia is on a state visit to France. As his motorcade proceeds through Marseille, a man jumps onto the running board of the king's car and fires a pistol at point-blank range. The king is hit multiple times. He dies within minutes. French Foreign Minister Louis Barthou, sitting next to him, is also shot and bleeds to death from a severed artery. The assassin, Vlado Chernozemski, is immediately attacked by the crowd and police. He's beaten, slashed with a saber, and dies from his injuries before he can be questioned. What makes this assassination historically significant is that it was filmed. Newsreel cameras captured the entire event, the motorcade, the attack, the immediate aftermath. It's one of the first political assassinations ever caught on film, and the footage is still shocking to watch today. Chernozemski was a Bulgarian revolutionary working with Croatian separatists who opposed Alexander's authoritarian rule over Yugoslavia. They wanted Croatia independent, and Alexander's death, they hoped, would destabilize the kingdom. It worked, sort of. Alexander's death weakened Yugoslavia, but didn't destroy it. The kingdom limped along under a regency until World War II, when it was invaded and dismembered by Nazi Germany. Alexander I's assassination demonstrated that modern technology, motion pictures, had changed political murder. Now, assassinations could be witnessed by millions, making them more powerful as propaganda tools, but also making assassins more likely to be instantly identified and caught. Number 9. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, killed by his nephew. March 25, 1975, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia is holding a majlis, a traditional public audience where citizens can meet the king and present petitions. His nephew, Prince Faisal bin Musaid, approaches. The king leans forward to greet his nephew with the traditional kiss. Instead, the prince pulls out a pistol and shoots King Faisal 3 times in the head at point-blank range. The king dies almost immediately. Guards seize the prince, who offers no resistance and seems almost calm. Why did he do it? The motives remain murky. Some claim personal revenge, Prince Faisal's brother had been killed by police during an anti-television protest years earlier, and the prince blamed King Faisal. Others suggest mental illness. The prince had a history of drug abuse and erratic behavior. Still others whisper about political conspiracy theories, though no evidence supports this. 3 months later, Prince Faisal bin Musaid was publicly beheaded in Riyadh, the traditional punishment for regicide in Saudi Arabia. King Faisal's assassination shocked the world because Saudi Arabia had seemed stable and royal family murders were extremely rare in modern Gulf monarchies. His death demonstrated that even in tightly controlled kingdoms, personal grievances could override loyalty, tradition, and self-preservation instincts. Faisal was succeeded by his brother Khalid, and the kingdom continued without major disruption, though security around the royal family tightened dramatically. 9 rulers, 9 murders, 9 moments when the most powerful people in their world discovered that power means nothing against a determined assassin. Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul and defeated Pompey, but couldn't survive the Senate. Caligula commanded legions but couldn't control his bodyguards. Edward II was king of England but couldn't prevent his wife from having him killed. Tsar Paul designed a fortress bedroom and was murdered inside it anyway. Some of these assassinations changed the world. Franz Ferdinand's death triggered World War I. Charles I's execution shattered the concept of divine monarchy. The Romanov massacre ended 300 years of dynasty and solidified Bolshevik power. Others accomplished nothing. Killing Caesar didn't save the Republic, it destroyed it. Murdering Caligula just gave Rome another mad emperor. Assassinating Alexander of Yugoslavia didn't free Croatia. What's the lesson? Throughout history, killing a king has been surprisingly easy, but rarely accomplishes what assassins hope. Power structures are resilient. When one leader falls, another steps forward. The system continues. But these murders remind us that no amount of power makes anyone invincible. Kings, emperors, and dictators all die the same way as everyone else, and sometimes more violently because they've made so many enemies along the way. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown, Shakespeare wrote. These 9 rulers learned that truth the hard way.